Ah. Hello, good afternoon.
Hi,
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Or good morning, or good evening. All right, Sokola, do you want us to start in next 2 minutes?
Yes.
Are we admitting people already? Yes, we should start in the next 2 minutes. Just 1 more minute. We start at 2:35 West African time, 2:35. Are all the panelists, are everyone in the room already? Favor, can you confirm that? Awesome. Okay. So we're going to start in the next 1 minute. Over to you, Arisokola. Let's commence, please.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be joining from.
Arisokola, is that your network?
In this year. Okay.
Okay, continue, please. You can hear you now.
Back? Am I back online now?
Yes, you're back. Yes, you are.
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Yes, so I was saying that this is the very first webinar we'll be holding in this year 2026, and it promises to be one that is thought-provoking, one that is inspiring, and one that is insightful. We have lined up some very expert speakers, panelists, and facilitators for this particular webinar. So, Sam, you want to go with the opening remarks proper.
Okay, so thank you very much, Arisokola. So today we'll be moderating this session with Arisokola, who is a colleague at the International Trade and Research Center. So within the International Trade Research Center, by the way, as you can see, my name is Simon Bakalo. I'm the founder of International Trade Research Center. We have like 4 centers in the center, and one of the centers putting this together is the African Cotton, Textile and Apparel Center. We have the African Intellectual Property Center, we have the Digital Economy Center, and we have the Green Economy Center. Today's session, of course, we all know is decoding the African cotton, textile and apparel trade, emerging trend, shifting market, strategic implementation. And this dialogue itself is a deliberate attempt the center has decided to put together over the years, starting from last year, to intellectually engage this sector. This sector, we believe, from the center perspective, from the ITRC perspective, even for the cotton and textile center perspective, need revamping intellectually. We cannot continue using bringing investment, to engage this sector. Intellectually, we need to engage it using industry insights to engage it. So we believe there's a misalignment, ladies and gentlemen, between African cotton, textile, and apparel sector with the changing global trend. This trend has to do with in the area of sustainability, regulation, market access, industry, consumer demand, and investment we even attract to the sector in Africa. And most importantly, consumers are defining what they want, how they want it, which value chain they are getting from. Because we all know in this room, virtual room, I must say, that most of the cotton raw material are from Africa. However, if you look at within the value chain, where we look at the high value addition segment of this, the yarn, the fabric, the finished apparel, Africa remains static. Africa remains, static in regulation, attracting investment in this evolving trend. But the truth is that our reality, will I say, fortunate or unfortunate, is that the world is evolving. Most importantly, with the ACTA coming on board now, and the rules of origin agreement being signed. So new corridors are being created. Buyers' requirements are being specific. And fresh markets are emerging. And they are emerging fast. Where are we? Where is Africa? Africa is not saying don't trade with other world, but Africa has to come to the table, and that's what we're trying to create now. So today's webinar, as colleague has mentioned, is the first of its kind for this 2026, but we'll have a series of them going forward. In the next 2 hours, we want to, first of all, identify the key emerging trend, shaping the CTA sector in Africa. We also want to highlight this growing market shifting and beyond what we know, and seeing that this is a practical conversation. We also want to assess what is the structural implication for industrialization, competitiveness, and value addition for Africa. What should policymakers know? We have a policymaker in the house. The conversation is going to set the tone for the conversation we'll be having throughout this year. Last year, we started with what is the investment we want for this sector, series of investment, bank finance, captive finance, boutique finance, all this. But this I want to say, these are the trend, and also we want to decode it, we want to make it plain for policymakers to understand. As we say, we've assembled policymakers, we have assembled industry players, we also assemble people that speaks and as well as write about these issues. They understand the dynamics, and they'll be presenting a number of this discussion. At the end of this meeting, we'll be bringing out a policy brief from here, and as well as at the end of the day, we'll also be releasing the flagship reports, which will dovetail into an event we'll have towards the end of the year. Ladies and gentlemen, without taking much time in today's conversation, I want to set the house rule. The house rule is that just as we've come in, we mute our mic. The presenters will make their presentations. We'll give a summary, and there'll be a time for question and answer. I want it to be interactive, and as much interactive as possible, so that we'll be able to see how do we decode this African textile? How do we move from where we are now and move to the top of the ladder and sit side by side with other regions of the world? Africa has to and must contribute to the global value chain. We have to move from where we are now, but we must understand the dynamics before we move. Having said the house rule and welcoming everyone, please feel free to be able to use the icon. When someone says something you like, use the icon and give the person thumbs up or clap for the person virtually. And as well, please keep your mic muted, and we'll have a robust conversation. I do welcome my colleague, Arisokola Mutala, to welcome the first speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam. That was quite an introduction, some energetic opening remark, if I may comment. Thank you so much. So today, our first speaker, is someone who brings more than 3 decades of hands-on experience across Africa's cotton, textile, and apparel value chain. Mr. Christopher Gutu is the founder and managing director of Cotton Pro Company in Zimbabwe. Cotton Pro Company is a spinning and weaving enterprise that is focused on transforming cotton lints into value-added textile products. Over the course of his career, Mr. Gutu has held several senior leadership roles within the region's textile industry, including serving as Group CEO of Moldzone Enterprises and Managing Director of Merlin Limited. And he has also chaired the Zimbabwe Textile Manufacturers Association. Beyond industry leadership, Mr. Gusso has advised governments and regional institutions on textile industrialization, local content development, and trade competitiveness across Southern Africa. Today, he will be speaking to us on shifting markets and emerging trade corridors. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Simon Christopher Gusso. Thank you. Mr. Gusso, go ahead and share your screen. Mr. Gusso, are you here? Are you on this call? Okay, I'm not sure he's here. Maybe we can have Dr. Jean, get started with the presentation. Is that okay?
Yes. I hope you can hear me well. That's
okay, great.
That's completely
Yes.
okay
So
if you want me to start.
in that case, you have to introduce Mr. Dr.
Exactly.
John Basti.
Exactly.
Go ahead, please.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So, Dr. John, please give me a few seconds to introduce you so that everyone on the call would know you. Okay. So Dr. John brings a strong combination of academic insights and practical policy experience in the development of textile and apparel industries. He's a strategy advisor specializing in industrial policy, public affairs, and sustainable development, and is currently based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. He holds a PhD in development studies from University of London, where his research focused on the emergence of Ethiopia's textile and garment sector. Over the past several years, he has been closely involved in advising on the strategic development of Ethiopia's export-oriented textile industry. He also contributes to policy recommendations. Today, Dr. John will be speaking to us on drivers of change in the global cotton, textile, and apparel trade. Thank you. You're welcome, Dr. John.
Thank you so much. And again, I would like to really thank you, the International Trade and Research Center, for hosting such an event. And also, I think it's quite important right now due to the current context. So that's perfectly timely. So I have 15 minutes, so I'll start immediately. Let me share my screen with you regarding the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope everybody can see. Please, I cannot see comments. So before starting, if there is anything, do not hesitate to even interrupt me because I cannot. If there is a technical issue or anything, please step in. So the main topic relates to the driver of change, as you said, in the global cotton and textile and apparel trade. So there is quite a lot to say. I'll start immediately with a very let's start with the beginning, which is basically the buyer-driven commodity chain evolution. You can see the summary has like 4 main topics. I try to be short because it's quite a large topic. But let's start with the buyer-driven commodity chain evolution. I will explain exactly what is entitling this expression. But maybe we could start with the beginning of the value chain, which is cotton. You can see just like a world map of cotton. So no surprise right now, the biggest producer of cotton is India. But you have also to take into account that this sector has undergone major change over the past 20 years. I think most of you have probably reviewed this. but before it was the US until the 80s. I just wrote few points. You can see in the bullet points on the right side of the slide, the major evolution, and let's say the top 4 producers remain India, China, USA, and Brazil, which is very new. Why is it important? Because for now, we know that, for example, China hold the largest reserve of cotton in the world, meaning that they can still play on the world price of cotton. So that has a big impact, let's say, for emerging economies and countries such as West Africa, or to some extent, Egypt, Sudan, and Tanzania. So the shift is favoring the countries that are now really producing apparel. So the linkage has been established for the past 30 years, looking at China and specifically India also. I move on to the next slide, which I start giving you the big base of, let's say, the backward linkage will move a bit to the value chain. And I would like just to present a sort of concept regarding the shift of the worldwide production. So allow me to use the concept that has been established by Gerefi, which say that we are living in a world which is dictated, if I may say, by the buyers, the big brands. So he called it the buyer-driven commodity chain paradigm. And it materialized under the format of a sort of triangle manufacturing. And I give an example, a very basic example, which was the fact that the US, or maybe Europe to some extent, brands place some orders with new industrialized country. I gave a few examples like Hong Kong, Taiwan, and even China, no? That then passed orders to emerging countries in manufacturing areas such as Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Vietnam, to some extent, we can talk about Africa. Then still, top closing exporting countries on the right side, you can see China is like way advanced with the other competitors, meaning Bangladesh, Vietnam, Turkey. We could say that China remain the big elephant in the room, the player that cannot be ignored into the global value chain today. And that is still the case, despite the fact that some change has been happening right now. So just for you to know, this triangle obviously is still existing, and it allows some big countries like China or even Bangladesh to go around a new trade agreement, worldwide trade agreement, such as it used to be the multi-fiber agreement. Now it is, for example, AGOA for Africa, and so on and so forth. Because of this triangle model, I hope I'm clear. But then if you need further explanation, I think there will be a Q&A. Let me carry on with the presentation. Then there is new trend regarding this kind of triangle model. As I said, you can see that first the trade agreement in numbers increased. So I talked about AGOA, but you have everything but harm for Europe, or the DCTS for the UK market. So access still remains challenging for some firms, but for this kind of triangle model, most of the firms, they have an access because of certification. I'll get back to that. Then you have another factor that needs to be taken into account, which is the buyer concern on the over-dependence over one or two sourcing countries. I mentioned China, and that's basically the case right now. Most of the key brands in the world would like to divert or diversify more or less their supplying or their, let's say, value chain from China to potential alternative country. There is also the case of Bangladesh, very famous, that you all know. There was the Rana Plaza incident in 2013, and you have also social unrest regarding wage and so on. Another concern that play a lot into the shifts regarding the sourcing diversification is obviously the risk, the regional tension, the Red Sea crisis, Middle East conflict, and so on and so forth. Before there was the COVID time, I do not get back to that. One also of the big factor was the AGOA, for if we look at Africa. the question and the new tariff imposed by the US. I can give you an example. For example, for Lesotho, faced a 50% increase of duty because of decision of the Trump administration. So basically, they lost most of exports to the US. These elements then led to a new setup, a really fresh one about the triangle manufacturing. Obviously, for EU market, the Northern Africa and the Horn of Africa in some way, but Northern Africa played a huge share into new consideration, the nearshoring, sourcing, and so on and so forth, and also in some way, the fact that most of these countries, Morocco, Tunisia, to some extent, and Egypt, did a sort of technological upgrade. And now they're in much more sophisticated fabrication or made of textile fabrics and other. So they can respond to potential new requests from brands. Horn of Africa, I will put that mainly under the fact that Horn of Africa, meaning Kenya mainly, is dealing with AGOA. And it's still the logistic way, a way that is possible for Kenya to source US markets, such as Walmart and so on. Then you have some countries like Ethiopia, but not only, that understood the triangle manufacturing and that tried to shift from, try to invite the brand like PVH. It's a very good example within a new structure that they used to call industrial park. It's now special economic zones, but to invite the top of the chain into the country and also to convey their own distribution, meaning that the Asian factories to come up to Ethiopia. And that was the beginning of the Hawassa Industrial Park. You have different models, as I said, that were in favor, that took advantage of the shift. And I mentioned Kenya, that now is reaching roughly 1 billion exports. Egypt also, that really make a breakthrough. I think they reach now $3 billion exports. Madagascar also, that play a lot regarding Europe because of many factors, but also took the most of these shifts, and that mainly support sourcing for France or US. Mauritius, which also has a long history, but that takes much more advantage from the global competition and the shift. But as I said, at one point, you still have China as the major player because they still dominate the game in the triangle manufacturing, and they still have a major domination in terms of textile input, and that should be really taken into account. Now, I just also get back to one critical point regarding access to markets, and I just put this slide for you regarding the sustainability and compliance. It plays a major role for most of the African countries to access market. So I took an example about certification. Nowadays, the Everything But Harm agreement allow any African countries with like zero duty to access Europe. However, as I said, most of the game is dictated by brands, but they attach to certifications. So to have a certification, you must respect some criteria. So I just put for you an example of the table on the left side of potential certification. It's a very, very narrow example, but you have like 20 certification that should be considered by by factories to access exporting market, especially the EU. But I just put some example about different certification, what kind of area it covers, and like the category. So let's say the OECO step, which is the most famous, that is like non-harmful safety product because you don't use chemicals and it goes to organic cotton and so on and so forth. This, to have that, has a certain cost, and the cost is also related to the advance of factory production. The way the factory is also organized then is conditioned by this kind of certification. It has a cost, it has a duration which is limited, so you have to renew it. You need to get the trust of buyers and so on and so forth. So that is another big criteria to respect buyer standards. It used to be in the past, but it's going to be even more stringent. Why? Because doubled with the certification side, you have now sort of, I will call it, international value chain regulation. So I just put for you as well some example in the boxes you can see. I hope everybody can see them, which are the German due diligence law, the French due diligence vigilance law, and the upcoming EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive that should be applied in 27. What does it mean? I will try to recap very quickly. All these directives or law state that the whole value chain should be complying with some critical environmental and social criteria or requirements. It could be forced labor, it could be fair wage or minimum wage, it could be chemicals, it could be things. And most of these laws are aligned with certification. So for the company that obey already to certifications that I mentioned in the previous slide, it might be less complicated. But however, this law may also play a new role and also add to the whole regulative constraint or requirement with the buyers to the firms in Africa and all over the world. I forgot to mention one law that should be also enacted in 2028, which is something called Extended Producers Responsibility, and it regards mostly the quality of textile. So producers should finance, for example, textile waste and potential recycling model. So you can imagine what does this imply in terms of cost for the value chain and the buyers and the factories. I move to the next slide. Now we talk about the cost, the speed, the reliability in the global supply chain. So there is no surprise. What we say usually towards the triangle manufacturing and basically the value chain in textile and apparel, what is the most important things for the buyers and the brand is costs, and the second thing is the cost, and the third thing is the cost. So nothing new for you, gentlemen, but now the lead time even is becoming more critical due to the whole logistic crisis we are facing in the global value chain, but also, as I said, with new trends such as e-commerce. But e-commerce is not that new. What is really new is the fast fashion and the ultra fast fashion. So I put some key aspects you can see now in the slides. The factory, they used to plan a long time ago, a few times a year about the season, aligned with buyers. Now, season does not exist anymore. The number of style per week can be dramatically increased by the social media and the consumer habits that are gathered by artificial intelligence. And that's critical aspect will be definitely play tremendously now in the future for emerging companies in different African economies that consider manufacturing and apparel. So the ultra fast fashion must be controlled in some way, but right now the trend is that we know that, for example, the number of flights cargo flight that delivered, Shein delivery to Europe is an equivalent to 100 flights per month. So it gives you an idea about the craziness of the logistic aspect, but also the fact that the number of styles, the pressure over the factory and the production line is even bigger. And then at the same time, we can see that there is implication for the work environment because most of the trend does not also relate to, let's say, working hours, labor rights, I would say. So to, let's say, try to see the evolution of the consuming modes, the impact, we can see that the e-commerce, the logistic also reorganized the entire value chain, okay? But then there is a big labor governance question that is emerging more and more, and that would be questioned also in all developing economies that's supporting the whole manufacturing sector, especially in apparel. We can see that there is a big question about the responsible purchasing practice. I put non-existent, but it does exist, but it's also a part that is being made in collaboration with the brands and the buyers. The supplier, they put huge pressure, as I said. The worker voice mechanism are questioned and weak. And this going to be even due to the international competition and the market that is distorted. There is no major regulation that should be an increasing factor. So the parceling business model is the right, I mean, no, it's not the right, it's the trend coming to us that endanger either the former model, which was relied on seasonality, but even the environment per se. So what is the big challenge for factories and let's say policy at large is to understand now this kind of constraint and to adapt, or maybe to not to prevent, but to adapt in a nice way. So regarding this cost and reliability pressure, there is a balance potentially that could be adapted by brands, buyers, but also by companies along the value chain. As I said, there is a due diligence legislation, but you need also to think about the profit. So I put a short scheme for you to see. There is the logistic cost, the gas price that may play against. There is the consumer market also that accentuate the pressure over the competition to, to get a breakthrough. So Europe, for example, is shrinking. US is stagnant. And then you have regulatory reaction, as I said, to prevent fast fashion. So, for example, I hope you can follow. I give you a quick example. France decided to tax small parcels. Why? Because it plays against, the whole due diligence about environment and so on and so forth. So there should be also some circularity models that could be put in place by the industry. So that's why I put this example for you. But in some regulation, it's already factored. Somehow it's still vague, but it's already factored, and I think it will be detailed in the upcoming directive along the coming years, let's say end of the decade and the beginning of 2030s. Then conclusion, well, no surprise to you, the change is now, but then we can see that the digitalization and research and development, they are the key aspect of the value chain to remain competitive and even to exist. So factory must invest in the 4.0 technology. You can see a tremendous influence of artificial intelligence. So I put some example that it could be a positive transformation for the whole industry with potential 1.5 trillion in terms of value. This has to be obviously seen, but there is a prospect. International brands, they're also readapting, as I said. They look at no-shoring sourcing, but they also try to balance the traditional cost and lead time priority, even right now.
Dr. John.
And yeah, I think it's over, right?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
it's actually 5 minutes over your
Exactly.
time, but it's okay.
So
You can
I just
quickly
would
round
like
up.
to finish with one
Yes.
aspect with regarding manufacturing policy with the industrial capacity, with what is the extent between the balance of opening to the economy and play the game, of entering the global value chain, but also protecting nascent industries. But that's an overall remark that can be detailed during the Q&A if people are interested to follow up. And I'll stop there. I'll stop my screen sharing, and I thank you all for your attention. And yes, I look forward to any question on that. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, Dr. Dan-Bastian Sean Besting, for that presentation on driving, on the driving drivers reshaping global cotton, textile, and apparel trade, and what they mean for African cotton, textile, and apparel positioning. Your analysis highlights about 4 key areas. I'm just giving a synopsis of what you presented. One is you did mention in the summary of what you have presented that the buyer-driven value chain evolution. You did mention number 2, that sourcing diversification and nearshoring. You also did mention that sustainability compliance as trade filters. It filters where people saw sustainability compliance. And you did mention that in the intensified cost, speed, and reliability pressure. And these are things that Africa has to be aware of. It's important to also note that you said cotton output has grown over time, and then there's a shifting production leadership from US to China to India, alongside the triangular manufacturing pattern in the apparel sector. You've argued that shocks are there. So there is this geopolitics that plays on in this. There is aspect of trade policy uncertainty. You also did mention that accelerating suppliers' demand and diversifying, creating new African clusters and emerging dependence on Asian textiles. And so there are a number of things you've mentioned in your presentation. You also mentioned the role of e-commerce. So we are not talking about season anymore. We're talking about how far is e-commerce playing and AI. So that means that if Africa's sourcing clusters are emerging, but textile input remain heavily dominated by China, we should be wary about this. The cost of compliance itself is high. I mean, Africa can comply with this, reaching about 25,000 euros. That is huge. African, as it is, has to brace up. AI is now playing a key role. It's real. This is real. AI is playing a key role. So we must understand the dynamics of this. And you've recommended steps that we have to take. Invest in Industry 4.0 to strengthen labor compliance, plan certification, roadmap, and the rest of it. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a whole lot to take away from what Dr. John Bastin has presented to us today. But I must say, it's important to us to know that, bearing in mind that 90%, I would say 90% of African businesses operate in the nano SME areas. How can they afford the certification cost? They will need support. But are they aware of this emerging trend? What practical steps will help the supplier and as well as the demand meet this? And the next presenter will also speak, but he's an industry player in Zimbabwe. He's supposed to have led this conversation earlier, but he's going to come in here. But by the way, you've opened up the floodgates. I believe even technically by divine orchestration, you've come in to throw this in, and we can hear from Tarama Gutu, how he approached this and the reality, because he's an industry player. You've given us this overview of the global trend, and we will have a robust conversation. Apparently, this is not a popular conversation across Africa for now, because I want to sell. But for you to say, you must understand what is changing and how you position yourself from intellectual perspective. So thank you very much for your presentation. Over to you, Arisokola, to welcome the next speaker, so that we'll stay within time. Thank you. By the way, the question and answer, I knew someone raised his hand up. There was a session for that after the presentation. Please note your question. You can as well drop it on the chat box if you don't want to miss it. There are a number of questions that will come out of this that I personally want to clarify, so with John Pastor. So others will also make input on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, San. Also, I want to reiterate that each speaker will be speaking for 15 minutes. So it is very imperative that we stay within that time frame, so that we're able to accommodate the the Q&A session, which is actually a very key aspect of this conversation. So again, I'm going to reintroduce Mr. Christopher Gutsu is finally joined us now, and I'll quickly just say that Mr. Gutsu is the founder and managing director of COTS.
I think Muritala's network. Okay.
Am I back?
Okay, go ahead now. I can hear you now. You are back now.
Am I back? Okay, so over the course of his
Yes.
career, Mr. Gutsu has held several senior leadership roles within the region's textile industry. He has served as the group CEO of Modzon Enterprises and managing director of Merlin Limited, and he has also chaired the Zimbabwe Textile Manufacturers Association. So when Sam mentioned that he's a key stakeholder in the industry, he knew what he was talking about. And beyond his industry leadership, he has advised governments, and he has contributed to local content development, trade competitiveness across Southern Africa. And again, today he'll be speaking to us on shifting markets and emerging trade corridors. Please join me once again in welcoming Mr. Christopher Gutsu. Mr. Gutsu, your time starts now and ends in 15 minutes time. You're muted, sir. Okay, good. We can hear you now.
Sorry, today hasn't been a great a great start, right? But I want to greet everybody and apologize for the technical disruption we had. Sorry for that, but I was waiting and hoping to link up. Can I ask if my presentation is showing? Hello?
We can see your screen, but the presentation is about coming up. Yes, it is coming up now.
Okay. All right. Since I've got 15 minutes, I better get to it. My presentation, I looked at, basically decoding Africa's CTA trade and shifting markets and emerging corridors of trade. So I'm going to try to answer in the first section A, where the fast-growing destination markets are. Where should African exporters be selling?
Sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt you. Can you put your slide in a presenter's mode so it can be more visible for all? You can put in a presenter, yeah. So
you need to. Sorry, how do I do that?
Okay, you can come to the bottom, I think, towards the bottom, by the volume component area where you see like a a projector stand. You click on that, TV stand. Yeah, the full screen. Yes, no, I think it's yes, that is it.
There.
Click on that. Good.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Is that?
Thank you very much. Let's make it happen.
Okay. All right. So there are some fast-growing markets that are available to the African textile and apparel markets, and they became quite interesting as I was looking at the research. As of May the 1st, 2026, China is offering 0 tariffs to African fabrics, yarns, and apparels. And that market opportunity is almost a $5 billion opportunity for yarns and between 10 and 14 billion for fabrics and apparels. and it's an immediate timeline. Then there's the regional Africa, driven by the All Africa Free Trade Agreement, which currently we are only utilizing just under $1 billion inter-African trade, but the potential is almost $6 billion. And implementation is between 3 to 5 years. There's the diaspora, where people of African descent are in different regions of the world, and this market has almost 140 million people, and it's worth about $100 billion in remittances annually. These people, the key is that these people are seeking cultural connection, and it's been made easier by the new payment systems like the crypto payments, and it's actually available now. There's the Middle East via Dubai, where Egypt is said to be targeting a $10 billion textile and apparel market for their exports, where Egypt will serve as a re-export hub using its proximity to Asia, and they are targeting to implement this between 2026 and 2028. So these are 4 massive markets, all demanding finished goods, but not raw materials like cotton. A bit of a deeper look at the Chinese opportunity is that there's a tariff advantage where China announced that African goods will attract zero tariffs from the current 5%. But there are current competitors, some of which are enjoying the same benefits, like Vietnam and Bangladesh, both on 0 tariffs. But Pakistan and India, have a 5% and between 5 and 17.5% tariff. Already, Vietnam exports 73,500 tons of yarn per month, which is equivalent, if you say it's $3 per kg for yarn, which is equivalent to over $200 million a month. Excuse me. So for us, we will have that 0% advantage quite immediately. And it covers all products from raw cotton, yarns, fabrics, and apparels. So how big is the Chinese market? The cotton yarn market is 4.8 billion, almost 5 billion. Fabrics are 4 billion. Apparels, 8 billion, totaling almost $17 billion, which is available for Africa. But who are the current, who enjoys the current market share for this market? Vietnam at 62%, Pakistan at 15%, Bangladesh 6%, India 5%, but Africa almost nothing. So the question is, why is Africa's share so low? Then I look at the untapped market, which is the regional market within Africa, where I alluded before that it's a $6 billion market, but we're currently only trading less than $1 billion amongst ourselves. So the market is comprising of, or the supply chain is comprising of new textiles, which is almost 4 billion, and secondhand clothing, which is 1.3 billion, totaling almost $5 billion. So we're importing what we can manufacture ourselves, and it's not child's play. It's a big market. So this is what we kind of import, the mitumbas, which are coming in to countries like Kenya. But recently there are announcements that France and Denmark are pushing for an EU-wide ban on secondhand clothing exports. And if this is implemented, then $1.3 billion of mitumba supply could vanish from the markets. There is a bit of tension. So for the mitumba trade to continue, mitumba offer affordable clothes for the poor, 2.2, just about 2 million jobs in Kenya alone. And there's really no alternative in Southern Africa right now. Against Mitumba, obviously, is that the textile industry, including my own business, has been stifled by these imports. And the countries are now dependent heavily on, I think, on waste. And it is very real that the EU may ban these imports. So for us in the manufacturing game, the EU may actually solve the problem, but we're not quite yet ready to take over from where the imports will be replaced. Section B is about declining markets and product categories, and those two products, well, it's one product of cotton is on the decline. And those markets, the US and Europe, are what we found to be declining markets. Raw cotton, Africa produces just about 2 million tons of cotton a year, but China holds in reserve almost 50% of global stocks, or just around 9 million tons. So if China releases just 1 million tons onto the markets, prices collapse and farmers suffer. So it's not a sustainable market. The other issue that our research found out was that there's something called the EUDR, or the EU Deforestation Regulation, which became effective in December 2025 for large corporates and will become effective in June 2026 for small and medium enterprises. This regulation requires proof that no deforestation after December 2020 occurred for those products grown in that particular area for export to the EU. In other words, if you opened a new field after December 2020 and you and you want to export those goods, they will not comply with the EU DR regulation. There are compliance costs between 740 to 2,000 euro per smallholder, which in some cases in Africa can be quite a big chunk of their annual income. And if you are not compliant, you cannot get into the your products into the EU. In addition to making raw cotton non-favorable for exporting, or that it's a declining product, China has cut its own tariffs for Chinese cotton for textile factories in China from 6% to 1%. This makes Chinese spinners get cheaper raw material, which means that African raw cotton will face more competition after it's been exported to China. So we're really encouraged to look at the value ladder and to reduce raw material exports and instead favor value-added exports. And that's kind of the ladder that you see there, that raw lint attracts maybe $1,000 to $1,500 per ton, but yarn, fabrics, and especially apparels attract a much brighter, better return of between 15 and 30,000, especially design.
To go.
Okay. All right. Section C, regional trade versus extracontinental trade. Africa hasn't been idle. There are some textile hubs being set up in countries like Ethiopia. There are Egyptian hubs and hubs in Benin, the GDIZ, which are trying to model themselves on the Chinese model, where everything is within an hour from where it's needed. I mean, spare parts, raw materials, you name it. So what is the problem with Africa is the spindle capacity. This is usually a measure of how big a textile industry is. In Africa, we are sitting on about 3.6 million spindles whereas China is 120 million spindles. So we need to invest a lot more into the textile and apparel value chain, because China is 33 times larger than Africa right now. And even Bangladesh as a country is much larger by 4 times than what Africa's spinning capacity is. We don't have enough power. We need to generate a lot of power. We don't have enough railway networks or roadway networks. We need to invest heavily into that to make products cheaper to move between countries. We have a lot of, and this is an area of concern, that there's a lot of non-tariff barriers, which are very serious, which constrain trade between the African countries. The tariffs are much less in severity than the non-tariff barriers. And then we spoke about the emerging clusters on the Chinese model, where, for example, there's within a radius of 200 kilometers in China, you can get everything that you require, which makes manufacturing a lot easier. We require foreign direct investment. I guess that's everybody knows that. We do have big gaps in investment. And those are the 3 questions that I think I have answered through my presentation: fast-growing markets, declining markets, and regional versus extra. And my final words are that China is opening its markets as of 1st of May. Vietnam is already taken advantage of that. So we won't have an excuse not to take advantage of the Chinese market. We need to increase the number of spindles by far, and the markets are open. In some cases, capital is available, and the model already exists. We need to deliver. Thank you. Hello.
Thank you so much, Mr. Guti.
Hello.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yes. We can hear
Okay.
you.
I've tried to get through it as quickly as possible.
Yes, you did, and we appreciate that. And
All right.
you know, yes. So we have just heard something that is that gives us a compelling reminder that Africa's cotton, textile, and apparel trade is evolving and is being reshaped by major structural shifts in global markets and supply chains. So a few highlights here. So something, I have about 3 or 4 of them here, but I'll just mention a few because of time. And the number one is that the global markets, okay, the opportunity is expanding, but Africa's participation remains extremely limited. What is particularly striking for me is that the barriers is actually not tariffs. In fact, we have just seen that China's recent decision to eliminate tariffs on imports from Africa starting in May 2026. So that means that African exporters can enjoy, the same tariff advantage as competitors such as Vietnam. Okay, and the implication of that is that, market access is no longer a constraint for us. Number 2 highlight for me is that which lies in Africa's position on the value ladder. We just saw a ladder now where we are basically capturing less than 5% of what we can capture just by exporting only cotton. So while the continent continues to export large volumes of raw cotton, the highest value and the fastest growing opportunities lie downstream, in yarn, fabrics, and finished apparel. And as Mr. Gutu pointed out, remaining heavily concentrated in raw cotton exports risks locking African economies into, lower value segments of the value chain. Let me quickly take this other highlight because I think it's very important as well. And that is structural bottlenecks, okay? And, these are actually the underlying issues that is shaping Africa's competitiveness. As much as we want to, talk more about how much value we are losing, the underlying issues are in the structural, infrastructure that we have here in Africa. So we have 14, we are producing 14. And the major reason why we are not able to capture as much value from the cotton as possible is because we don't have those structures that we have highlighted. So, the presentation, highlighted several of these constraints. And at the same time, we see that transport costs, infrastructure fragmentation, they are the issues that continue to limit the efficiency of the Africa CTA supply chains. However, there are signs of progress from the presentation that we have just heard. We are beginning to see the rise of textile and apparel clusters hubs, in countries such as Ethiopia. I also heard you mention Benin, talking about what the GDIZ is doing, and also Egypt. And all of these are coming alongside new investments in trade, in transport corridors, in energy systems, and industrial zones. So these developments suggest that the foundations for deeper industrialization, they are gradually being put in place. And so perhaps for me, the central message from this presentation is that our challenge in Africa CTA is not a lack of market opportunity, but the need, to actually build integrated industrial ecosystems that are capable of capturing as much value as possible from the supply chain, so that we can also upgrade our market at scale. And with that framing in mind, we'll move into the next stage of our discussion, where we will continue to explore the implications, of these issues. What these implications, what do they actually mean for the Africa textile, apparel value chain, the competitiveness and the future, industrial positioning for Africa CTA value chain. And so that brings me to introducing our next speaker, Emma Bassi, who brings an extensive experience at the intersection of industrial policy, manufacturing, and value chain development within Africa textile and apparel sector. Emma Bassi is a textile, apparel, and industrial development specialist with over a decade of experience working across Africa's manufacturing and trade ecosystems. Currently, she serves as a special advisor on cotton, textile, and garments, to Honorable Minister of State for Industry at the Nigeria's Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. And there she supports industrial policy and value chain development initiatives. She's also currently engaged with UNIDO, that is United Nations Industrial Development Organization. She's to the implementation of Nigeria's program for country partnership with a focus on strengthening regional value chains and expanding manufacturing-led growth. So to speak to us, like I said earlier, on the strategic implications, of all of these issues that we have outlined, the strategic implications of these issues for Africa. Please join me in welcoming Emma Bassi.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me fine?
Perfectly, we can.
All right, thank you so much, ITRC team, and of course, fellow speakers, Mr. Guptu, Mr. Jean-Baptiste. I've also learned so much. Just give me a few minutes whilst I share my screen. Are you able to see my screen fine?
Yes, we are.
Okay, fantastic. So I'll just put it in full mode. Isn't it working? Full on your screen, because it's supposed to go into full mode now and it's not. Okay, don't worry, I've done that.
We are cool with this.
All good.
Okay.
All right. So thank you so much once again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here to contribute to this sort of discussions. Like mentioned earlier in the introduction, this is my sector. I've been doing this for more than a decade, and I'm deeply passionate about the sector. So my topic today is the strategic implications for Africa's CTA trade. Now, I must say that I found that much of what I have in my presentation, the previous speakers have touched on it, which on one end is really good because it means that we are all aligned with where our sector is and what needs to be done. But on the other end, I'm thinking, am I not repeating what everyone has said? But I'm going to go on ahead and walk you through some of my thoughts. So once again, thank you so much for having me. So the previous speakers have identified, some of the key global shifts that are already shaping our sector. Top on that list is the supply chain diversification, seeing buyers moving away from dependence on single countries, China plus one strategies. We're also seeing a lot more nearshoring and regionalization, Europe sourcing closer to Turkey, North America, US also nearshoring to Central America. There's also been an uptick over time in sustainability focused regulations. So we're seeing digital product passports, strict traceability requirements, and speed to market pressures is also something that is surfacing quite frequently these days, with smaller orders, shorter lead times, as well as the request for integrated supply chains. So what does this mean for Africa? I would say that Africa has three structural advantages. Of course, we have a huge raw material base, cotton, as well as other fibers. We have kenaf, we have hemp. So there are a lot of other fibers that we grow locally or continentally. There's also the proximity to Europe, which is an advantage. The speaker had also talked about, the EU trade for arms agreement, and there's also the preferential market access agreements. So there is AGOA, EU, and recently also the one to China. But the missing piece remains industrial capacity. There is a gap between raw material supply and translating that into industrial products at scale for global consumption. So one key message I want to pass across today is that the global market is shifting. Africa's opportunity depends on building regional value chains rather than remaining raw material exporters. I'll walk you very quickly through what we've observed as a current pattern. I'm sure a lot of people are already familiar with this start. So we have very high raw cotton exports, over 80%, low levels of yarn and fabric production, low apparel exports, and high trade imbalance. We see that we're doing over 15.5 billion of exports of textiles, but we are bringing in so much more textile clothing and footwear at about $23.1 billion. Now, what happens is that we are at risk of remaining locked in low value trade. And what are some of these risks? First, value capture loss. Now, since much of the value, like a previous speaker already alluded to, sits in textiles and manufacturing, branding and retail, when we stick to exporting our raw cotton, we capture the smallest share of the value. The second one is vulnerability to price volatility. Naturally, we've seen what happens with commodity prices. It simply means that we are at the mercy of global prices and our farmers are left with unstable incomes. The third is industrial stagnation. Naturally, if we don't have any upstream and midstream industries, we can't create jobs, we can't develop skills, we can't adopt technology. We're seeing AI being used, robotics. We don't have anything on ground to absorb and adapt that kind of technology. And lastly, we miss losing out on new value chains, new opportunities in integrated value chains. We're seeing buyers want more full package production. We miss losing out on capturing that value, especially as Africa, that we have, a lot of rich heritage and culture that comes from the garment production side and the fashion side. All of that is lost in translation because we are not structured industrially. So once again, another key message is that remaining a raw material supplier means that we participate in global trade, but we do not shape it. So I've identified what I call 5 priority areas for policy, investment, and regional coordination. The first one is on regional value chains, building and connecting regional value chains. The second one is on garment-led industrialization. I'll walk you through each of them in subsequent slides. Third is trade intelligence and market positioning. Number 4 is strategic textile capacity. There's a mistake on this slide, and number 5 is supposed to do with policy. So I'll take you there. So the first one, regional value chain. So We already know the flow of the chain. We go from cotton to yarn to fabric to garments. Now, not every country must do everything, but regional integration will be extremely valuable to us. So we have cotton in West Africa, spinning and weaving. We can have the northern hubs for that. We can have East Africa hubs like Kenya and Ethiopia. And then for garment manufacturing, we can prioritize labor-intensive locations like Nigeria. The AFCFTA becomes particularly critical in enabling this sort of regional integration and enabling competitive advantage utilizations across a number of countries on our continent. Now, number two is garment-led industrialization. Historically, most textile industries were revived through garment demand. So if you want our textile industries to grow, then we also should be supporting garments to pull demand from textiles. So I would say that for me, policy priority should focus on industrial parks and clusters, reliable power and logistics that supports these parks. Now, garments, as we know, create a ton of jobs. There's a demand, increases the demand for local textiles, and of course, contributes very heavily to export revenues. Number three, strategic textile capacity. Now, Africa cannot continue to rely on imported fabric, so we need to invest in that. Obviously, priority areas will include spinning capacity, weaving and knitting, and dyeing and finishing. And we should focus on this as competitive industrial hubs, you know, really just aligned with what I said in the previous slide, not disperse factories, because whether or not we like it, we have infrastructural deficiencies that we cannot solve in 2 or 3 years. So by supporting hubs and making those hubs competitive, then we can begin to make progress in addressing some of these gaps in textile capacity. Number four is trade intelligence and market positioning. African exporters, they need better market intelligence. You need to know what the market is looking out for so that you can go ahead to meet that demand. So they need intelligence on emerging sourcing markets, buyer requirements, product niches, and for instance, some strategic positioning examples. Egypt is doing very well with this with sustainable cotton. We also have a very huge advantage with our traceable supply chain because we have the entire value chain domiciled on the continent, so that if we are conscious and proactive about this, we are able to really align with traceability requirements and narratives. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, just really showing that as a region, we are an integrated value chain and we are able to compete at par with anyone else in the world. Lastly is coordinated policy execution. In Africa, we do not lack policies, we do not lack paper, we do not lack ideas. What we lack is execution, and in some cases, what we also lack is fragmentation. We are seeing industrial policy, creative policy, trade policy, agricultural policy, and there's no aggregation and overlap between these policies to ensure that these policies work together as a cohesive and a comprehensive framework that supports the growth of our sectors. Now, the AFCFTA offers a framework generally for trade, and you know, it's embedding some of these, like the previous speaker. There's a lot of conversation going on about how we can address trade barriers, tariff barriers, as well as non-tariff barriers, and all of that. In some instances addresses some of these existing disconnects with different policies, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we are aligning our policies, and beyond that, we are implementing our policies at a national level. So as I wrap up, I would say that Africa's cotton, textile, and apparel sector sits at strategic crossroads. Now, we're seeing global supply chains being reorganized, markets are shifting, buyer expectations are evolving. The quick question is no longer whether Africa participates in CTA trade. The question is whether Africa participates as a supplier of raw materials or as an integrated industrial player, capturing greater value across the chain, from cotton to textile to garment to branding and to retail. And thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much, Eme. That was quite comprehensive and direct to the point. I particularly appreciate the fact that you quickly summarize, you know, some of the points that the previous speakers have touched, and then you took us directly, you know, to what we should actually be focusing on. Those are the priority points that will drive us forward in this conversation. of building a sustainable, Africa CTA market. And so I want to quickly highlight some of those priorities, and these three, particularly stand out for me. And the number one is that the development of regional value chains. You did mention that we have, diversified strengths across the continent, and so while we have, cotton production in West Africa, we have production hubs over there, spinning and fabric production and garment production across, across other regions, the Northern Africa, the Eastern Africa. So why don't we bring all of this together into a comprehensive regional value chain? And I think that is why quite straight to the point and on point for me. In this context, you did mention that implementation of AFCFTA becomes, particularly important in enabling this cross-border industrial integration. A second priority that I really, align with very much is the garment-led industrialization. Okay, every industry or every region that has grown their textile value chain, they move that by focusing more on apparel production. And I think it was the first speaker, Dr. Jean, who also took us through that buyer-driven model. Who are the buyers? The consumers, the suppliers who are, supplying and selling the brands, okay, the fashion houses. So if we're able to focus on, and lead this industrialization, focusing on apparel production and garment production, it brings us to a point where we are driving a successful textile economy, because historically this has been the entry point for many economies that have actually grown their industry. So expanding garment manufacturing can stimulate demand for domestic textiles, generate employment and build export capacity. You also mentioned strategic textile capacity. You also mentioned coordinated policy execution. And the last one that really stands out for me is also improving trade intelligence and market positioning. This is actually very essential, and is one of our priority here also at the Africa CTA Centre, one of the arms of ITRC, as Mr. San, mentioned in his opening remarks. So, all of this together, like I said, you gave us a direction towards not focusing on the implications of the issues that we have, but how we can move from these implications towards what we want to see from where we are to where we want to be. And ultimately, for me, the key message, as you have rounded up, as you concluded, is that the real question for us is, how can Africa, participate in global CTA trade, and how much value we can capture along the value chain. Thank you so much once again, Eme Basi. I will now hand over to San, to moderate the question and answer session.
Awesome. I'm just kind of excited. Thank you very much, Aristokola Murtala. This is fully practical presentation. This is not of theory to a large extent, because even when you say the theory is the application of it, the reality is that you need certification. And what are the certification you need? These are A, B, C, and there are cost implications. How do you address it? And that is why at this point, I'll open the floor for the first question. Before I ask my own question, I'm going to have a number of questions and direct it to whoever you want to ask. So you have the opportunity right now to do that. Does anyone? I saw a hand up earlier on. Okay. Mukhtar Dodo, please go ahead and unmute yourself. ask your question, introduce yourself, organization, and possibly 1 minute, and then we move. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. San, and thank you to all the presenters. This topic is very important to me as well because I also work in the textile value chain certification, to be precise, and we have been making so much effort to see how we can bring more of the African textile industry into the global value chain. So my question goes to Mr. John Baptiste. Where does he see certification and regulation sit in relationship to the growth in ultra-fast fashion consumption in the EU? Because I really can't understand how, despite the EU regulations being quite stringent these days, there's still a high consumption of ultra-fast fashion in the EU market. And then secondly, what does he think of group certification schemes for Africa's SMEs, whereby SMEs could come together and have a group certification to reduce the burden of certification costs? So those are my two questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Dr. John Bastin, you can unmute now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
I heard for your question. I think that's exactly the paradox of this situation. One side, EU is regulating at all levels. You saw due diligence directive, and then yes, you have fast fashion, ultra fast fashion groups such as Shein that completely submerged the EU market. So just to getting back to your question, for now, to let's say tighten the regulation in line of their own environment and social criteria. Yes, at the same time, Shein is basically taking the loophole of the regulation to send. I mentioned the issue of the parcel. I don't know if I was very clear on that, but France issued a new regulation regarding the parcel. Parcel means that Shein model is playing on a small quantity, as you understand, of clothing delivered directly to the consumer to boost their market. Besides, so the idea of the French regulation to prevent Shein is to apply taxes, as very simple. But there is a growing concern overall about this competitive asymmetry that even EU-based producers are very concerned about this lack of compliance from one external player. So, but I guess the future, this platform will be regulated within the EU market. So that might be a sort of a shift coming. Let's see if I'm right in my forecast. So that's really true. This is a paradox, ultra fast fashion and regulation. And then the group certification, also it's a very good question. I'll try to be very fast. In the past, indeed, I remember even some Senegal, I think, producers grouped together to have one certification. So that could be a solution regarding SME, for example, or maybe farmers or producers under one pooling resource to have economy of scale and to access new markets. But then there is a question of being completely aligned, all of them, all being company, farming, or whatever you want to call it, in terms of being aligned with the same skills that could regard digital, or that could regard, best practices applied into the field, or maybe access to finance also. So there could be a pool. That I really do believe that there could be a pool effect of group certification for SME. However, even cross-border, hub, sometimes on borders you have different, like cotton on one side, and the other side you have the factories, but it's a larger scale. But then this issue of streamlining skills can be one thing to address, maybe by some policy initiatives that in a very fast manner. This could be my reply. I hope I was clear.
Okay. All right, so thank you very much. So does anyone have any other question? Before I just maybe dovetail into Tararama, Christopher Gutu, if he considers, has there been any, based on your practical experience as the head of one-time head of a manufacturing association of Zimbabwe, and as well as even owning your own founding member or founder of Cotton Limited. This group certification, because it's important, this is what we are talking about. Even within Africa, certification is also important, even why it's not visible or loud. Is there any challenge with group certification? I was thinking, who owns the brand under group certification? Are they going to go out with one name or through the cooperative name? Because one of the things I realized about African business is that there is this mindset of nano, I have to own mine. It has to be about me. It has to be about me. But you cannot scale with when it's about you. When you approach, you can only get formal and scale when you have the resources. You don't have the resources, you don't want people to know, they're going to get, but you remember. So how would group certification in real sense, or have you seen anyone working with that under a cooperative, or what system we put in place? Because a lot of things go with it: branding, quality, the system of judging. So go ahead and give us a little bit of insight in practical terms, and please, Brasi, think about the policy dimension, because I'll be coming to you next, because that policy is key. You are an industry player now, you are advising. You're advising. So what role will you operate? So Tarama, you have the floor. While we wait for them to raise their hand if you have any question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are you able to hear me? Okay, great. One of the things that we experienced during the 80s was that we, being a former colony of the UK, we had access to the UK market, and we were exporting quite a lot to quite a number of big brands in the UK. And all of a sudden, we had to now comply with Okotex. And it was a totally new animal to us that, our whole chemistry in the dyeing section, in the coloration section, had to be changed, and, so that it could comply with the requirements overseas, so that the products could actually be sold and could actually enter into the UK market. But unfortunately for us, we saw each other as competitors. We tried to win market share at all costs and try to bury the next guy, and even factory visits. You could not go into a competitor's factory into a competitor's factory to see how they particularly made something to work out a standard. We've got an industry standards association of Zimbabwe, a country association, where most of these standards should have been kept, but they are very poorly financed, and they don't have equipment to do the standards, and so that you can certify and so forth and so forth. So on that score, to cut a long story short, we fell very short. We didn't work as a cluster. We worked more like competitors, and we never thought of it this way. It's a good idea in hindsight.
Yeah, so this is the challenge. Group certification will be a challenge. So it's not going to work in Africa. That should be a mind change. Poro, is it Povro? Pulva Kakari. Please, you have, yes, fantastic. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you very much for this discussion as well. I put a few points in there, but I realize it's long. But the main thing I want to raise is exactly leaving where Mr. Gutu just ended. So at what point do you bring in this idea of cooperation? while also making sure that you need to remain competitive. So taking the point of the AFCFTA, I completely agree that this gives us a different framing. And I take the point as well that textiles is the launch pad rather than apparels, etc. But we need to balance the different capabilities that exist on the continent. So cotton in West Africa, textiles maybe Ethiopia, retailers in South Africa. We need to balance between these capabilities, but also the different kinds of investors that we have. So you have some Asian investors in Kenya, in Lesotho, in Eswatini, who depend mostly on the preferential access to mature markets in order to have their investment stay. You have some others who are more regional, like the South Africans or the Mauritians. So how to balance between them, and also how to balance between the different markets that they cater to. In Kenya, they're looking mostly at the markets in the US with AGOA. In North Africa, they're looking at Europe. And then in Madagascar, maybe they're also looking at the regional market. Eswatini and Lesotho also do. So should the focus of policy then under the AFCFTA be how to build on these different sprouting regional value chains that do exist, or should it be to have a continental vision that is disconnected? And to make that connection, you need to bring policy and private sector closer together. That's the main point I want to make. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that view, because I looked at I was like, say, this is a presentation on its own, by way of the way you articulated your point. So policy. Eme Bassi, you've talked about, it's not more of policy. Policy is there. It's about implementation. You are in the industry. Now you speak to a minister that is very proactive, by the way. Congratulations for the industrial policy that we have. For years, Nigeria has not had. And Nigeria occupy a very strategic position. The FCFTA, you might not have much, but your colleague just nominated Olusegun Olutayo as the national coordinator of the Office of AFCFTA implementation. And we know the value chain, $6 billion. That is huge. And Tarama has also mentioned that the cooperation is not even there. So how do we see what policy? Because for me, it's like information asymmetric. So someone has information about where to go to, they hold it to themselves, they're not growing with it, they cannot opening up. So how do we balance this? What is the policy? What are you advising the minister to do? Say for Nigeria, for example, we still lock our border about certain things. What should we do to unlock this opportunity from the policy perspective? How do we bring this different spaghetti web? Because this one is looking at Asia, this one is looking at Africa, this one is looking at Europe. Bring them together to say, guys, let's be focused and have a deliberation on the policy perspective. Just talk us through it. We have limited time. I think, Favor, are we still within time? Go ahead, please.
Yes, so we'll just have, sorry, Emma, before you go on, we'll just have Emma respond to that question. And then there are several questions that have been dropped in the Q&A. And there's a suggestion by Dr. Jean that he could, say volunteer to answer those questions, put them in writing, and then if we approve of it, we can, have those answers shared to the participant at a later stage after the webinar. So I think that we can do that, right?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can, because our time is fast spent, but we'll have Emma answer that question, and then we'll do a closing remark, and then collate all of these questions with answers from the speakers, and then we'll share with the participant. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Emma, have the floor, please.
Thank you, Sandy. You're putting me on the spot quite a bit, and merging so many questions in one. So I'm going to say what I can't say. I can't say that we are currently, this is for Nigeria, of course, we are currently working on revising the 2015 cotton, textile, and garment policy. So we have a set dates between ending of Q2 through Q3 for that to be done and launched. Now, that policy basically looks across all the different measures that the government needs to provide and enable for the sector to move forward. One measure that is very well captured is markets. And markets is broken down into three. There is public procurement, which we term as government market as a buyer. There is the domestic market, which for a country of over 200 million people, that is large, with an import bill of, in Africa of about $7 million coming in of textiles. And then, of course, there's also the international and regional market of particular interest with the AFCFTA. Now, I think over the next couple of weeks, we're going to now actively, so there is a draft, but we're going to now actively have players, stakeholders, both government as well as private sector stakeholders that are concerned with each of these different measures. So say for instance, for market measures, then we want to maybe, for instance, have the AFCFTA secretariat. We want to have those particular individuals to come in and support the refining of that draft. And the idea is that two things. One, we will be having a policy that already has buy-in from the get-go, because when you just go ahead and make a document and tell people, okay, you come, this is what you do, it usually doesn't work. But if you're able to already collaborate with the respective stakeholders and they can share information, okay, this is how we're looking at things over the next 2, 3, 5 years. This is possible. This won't be feasible. I think we should step this down. So that way, whatever it is that we are putting out at the end of the day will be a proactive document, not a wish list. It will be a document that stakeholders, industry players can act against. Also trying to back it with some financial commitments. We're just trying to essentially ensure that this goes beyond just another sheet of paper. Now, there may be some elements that given the nuances, unique nuances of our country, that we may not be able to factor in. For instance, you talked about the AFCFTA is still in progress. There's still conversations going on. We will not be able to fully factor in the scope of that framework and the ongoing conversations into policy. But the idea is that once we have the buy-in of the players, then naturally we can evolve and make progress as new information becomes available. So to wrap up, I would say that this is a sector of focus, a sector of interest, which is the reason why I was pulled in the very first place. I'm not aware of any minister ever having a special advisor specifically for this sector. I think that goes to show the focus that the Minister of Industry is putting on this sector to ensure that it works, given its potential in our country for jobs, for export revenue, and for just our GDP. So we are taking the necessary steps, starting with policy and not just creating a document that actively engages all of the relevant players to ensure that they are in with us and ready and on standby to execute once it is launched. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. For me, this is I've finished my job, so I'll hand over to Aristokola because we don't want to drag any further. But by the way, I'll be reaching out to you bilaterally. We are action people as an organization, so we're going to be actioning some things. I'll bring in Africa to Abuja come October. I'm going to have bilateral discussion with you on that, and every other stakeholder, Tarama, and even Dr. John Basti that has left. We're going to put some things together. And by the way, we're also creating a platform, a WhatsApp platform that will also bring in stakeholders from policy, from industry people, and colleagues will be sharing email on the report. When we share the report after this, so that people will join. We will want to be doing the next 5 years. It's not about talking. We're bringing intellectually engaged and practically implementing what we talk about. Recommendation will come out of this, and we'll action it. In the next 10 years, 5 years, we'll say from this, there is a market opening. That market has emerged. Bringing Africans together to speak, to exhibit, to talk this issue physically will be something that we are working on. So I will reach out to you, and we'll discuss it and action our plan after this conversation. Thank you very much. Over to you, Aristokola Mitsala.
Fantastic. What a fantastic and comprehensive conversation it has been for everyone. So as we're bringing this webinar to a close now, I want to quickly take a moment to reflect again on some of the key insights that have emerged from today's discussion. And number one is that across the three presentations, we have seen a clear picture that Africa's cotton textile and apparel sector is operating in a global industry that is changing rapidly and structurally. Okay, so from Mr. Gutu's presentation, we saw that trade patterns and market opportunities are shifting, and emerging corridors are expanding across Africa, and that is a potential for Africa to scale. Okay, Dr. Jean helped us to understand the deeper structural drivers shaping the global CTA value chain. We heard how buyer-driven supply chains, sourcing diversification, sustainability standards, compliance, okay, they are growing importance of speed and cost. They are defining how and where production takes place. Finally, Emma brought these insights together by focusing on what this means for Africa, and then showing us a path, a path forward. So taken together, today's discussion reinforces that fundamental point again, to restate it again, that the question is no longer whether Africa participates in global CTA trade, is how much, how strategically we participate and how much value we are able to capture from that supply chain. And so this is precisely why, like Sand mentioned, is the reason why platforms like this, like the Africa CTA Centre and the ITRC, this is why we exist. Okay, our objective is to support policymakers, manufacturers, investors, and development partners with data-driven insights, okay, and strategic analysis like this one that we have done here that will inform better decisions across the CTA apparel, the CTA ecosystem. So today's webinar is part of a broader effort, again, to mention that we want to strengthen trade intelligence, we want to strengthen policy dialogue and industry collaboration around Africa's CTA sector. I did mention earlier that we are developing, a key data infrastructure. That one of the points that Emma mentioned earlier, an intelligence system where key stakeholders across the continent would gain a lot of value from. So before we close, I also want to reiterate again, to second what Mr. San said, that we will be sharing, we'll be launching a community, a WhatsApp community. We're going to be calling it the Africa CTA community on WhatsApp. Okay, and this is designed.
It has been created. It's on the chat box now.
All right.
It has been created.
Perfect. So this is designed to create a more continuous space for engagement beyond webinars like this one. Okay, our webinars are monthly, but these conversations are daily. So we want to create a system, a community where we can have continuous conversation around it. And the goal is to have us connect with one another across the ecosystem. And the key benefit for members is early access to insights and analysis of CTA across Africa, updates on emerging policy and market developments, notifications about upcoming webinars, reports, and events. We have a very big event that we are planning now for Abuja. We'll be having conversations around that, coming up sometimes in Q3 or Q4. And the benefit is also an opportunity for us to exchange ideas and perspectives with other CTA stakeholders across Africa. And like Mr. San mentioned again, we want to be doers, not just talkers. Okay, so we don't want to have a webinar and then have no action to take from the webinar until we have another webinar on another month, and then we'll continue to stack up webinars like that. No, we want to move beyond conversations to actions. Okay, so we believe that building stronger networks of information and collaboration will be essential if Africa is to fully realize the opportunities within the global cotton, textile, and apparel industry. And with that, I would like to say a very big thank you to every speaker for their excellent contributions today, and every single member in the audience for joining us and engaging in this important conversation. We look forward to continuing this dialogue in the months ahead, and I want to say thank you and have a wonderful day and a restful weekend, everyone. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you very much. So we can as well turn our camera on for a family photo. Thank you. We have dropped the link onto the WhatsApp platform on the chat box. Please do click and join. We will also send by email to you. It's voluntary, and we know that you benefit greatly from it. Thank you very much. And so have the guys taken the picture? You know, you can turn your camera on. Have we taken? Okay, we have. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I want to say bye-bye for now.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
All right.
Bye.
Well done, guys.
Bye.
Well done.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Lovely weekend ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, and you too. Bye. Hi. Hi, Daru. You all right?
Good to see you, Sanj. Very informative.
Yes, man. Thank you. All right. Okay. Yeah, bye.
All right. Bye, everyone.
All right.
Thank
Bye.
you,
Bye.
Mr. Tutu.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. So maybe we can.
Yeah. So regarding the question and answer, so I have been able to pull out those questions that were asked. I will have to just edit to put it in a doc file, and then I'll share it so that we can have the speakers answer those questions afterwards, and then we can share it with the audience.
Yes, yes. I think wow, the presentation today is so rich and practical in the true sense of it. So that means there's a lot of work to be done. There is a lot of engagement. How do we transform this? So truly, it's not tariff. It's about capacity to meet this expectation.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
who are people interested in this area, and how do you make them interested? So that means we have a lot to key into, but people are not looking at it. 6 billion just in African trade. 25 billion.
Very massive.
Wow. So infrastructure has to be the provision, market access, not market access now. It's even how you get market access is you have the certification is a must. So what incentive would you be available to make people get into this? We also have to talk about how do you even arrange them to the quality assurance, not just exporting. So articulate this policy brief will come out of this, but also feed into our flagship program happening. So we'll take this off onto the platform to also discuss the aspect of what topic you want to put forward for the October event. Basi to get a buy-in. Whatever happens, we're in for a good ride. Thank you very much, and have a pleasant day ahead. Do you have anything to say? Does anyone have anything to say? I'll feel into our what worked, what did not work well. We managed at time where in my view. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I actually had a call with Favor during the session. So I think we would have to find a way to manage the timing, the allotted time for speakers, so that they don't exceed as much as possible. They don't exceed. Okay, so that we can always have that Q&A, and then also I think we would have to get to a point where we'll have appoint one person to manage the Q&A. So as soon as we get to the Q&A session, and that is more or less the reason why we must stick to time, so that the Q&A session will also go, we'll have enough time for the Q&A session. So we need to appoint one person to manage the Q&A. So as I was surprised to see that there had been questions that had actually been dropping even while the conversation, while the speakers were presenting, and it was just almost at the ending that I saw the questions. So So that, and then managing the allotted time, I think that is something that from my end we need to work on.
Yeah. The questions were long, so I wanted to summarize them to be able to ask the speakers. They were long questions, and I think it's a Pova that asked that question. I don't know where she's based, but yes, you're right. So we have to manage the time. But if you give the time we started like 5 minutes into the time.
Yeah.
And we concluded 10 minutes past the time. So maybe just minute time, time different. Again, we also have to do something about the participation. Because with this conversation, very practical conversation, and we have very few people. Yes, we know it's a very easy technical session, but at the same time, it's information people need to know about. So we have to develop a strategy just beyond just sending email to people. Again, we have to look for an email sending platform that will not direct most of our mail to junk box. An email that just like sender post that we had before. Secondly, maybe also do a promotion on social media, because whether we like it or not, and these guys have monetized everything. You might send fantastic idea. They will just put the algorithm one side, nothing organic about it. You must put your money there and you see the thing, right? So we will allocate some resources. Maybe we will start it in April 1. We'll allocate some resources on LinkedIn promotion, Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram. We'll see how that goes. So that we get the buy-in that we want. Put in some resources, even do a press briefing outside this. Maybe we can even try this, do a press release and publish it in National Daily. We do a press release about this what we discuss now. Decoding, when we do the policy brief, we write a press statement and publish it in a National Daily. In a National Daily after this one. It just drop some 1 or 2 thousands of naira. I'll do it. We'll do it in this one. We deploy different strategy. The whole idea is that we are deferring our gratification. We're not earning anything here, but for me, I'm happy to make a sacrifice for the industry, just like every other thing that we're doing. So it has impact and it has a wide reach that we desire. In build up to November, everything is to October, everything is strategy. We deliberately think about it, we act on it, and you see the outcome come. Thank you very much, everyone. Yeah. Any other inputs? Does anyone have any other stuff to say? If not, we can call it a day.
Yeah.
Okay.
So nothing from my end, sir.
Okay, not from me. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a fantastic weekend. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.